So we're in your world history. We're in chapter 15, section 3, and we're going to be talking about the English and Scottish Reformation. So we're going to focus over onto the island of Britain in England. And we're going to talk about the Tudors, Bloody Mary, Good Queen Bess, and on to Mary Stuart. The Tudors and the English Reformation. Well, the Tudor period brought great progress in art, literature, science, and trade. The greatest event, though, in England was the English Reformation. England was severed from the Roman Church, and Protestants was firmly established. So here we have a picture of the Tudor lineage, Tudor kings and queens. And so starting with Henry VII, on to Henry VIII, which we're going to be talking a lot more, and his son Edward, and on to his daughter, Henry's daughter, Mary Tudor, who was considered Bloody Mary, and then on to Queen Elizabeth, that's considered Good Queen Bess. Henry VII was the first Tudor king. Now you were reminded about Henry. He actually was considered a good king because in winning the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485 against the Stuarts, he ended the Wars of the Roses. Remember, the two different families were warring on who should be royalty. And you had the white roses and the red roses. That was their emblem. Well, he won, and he also married into the other rose, so uniting the War of the Roses. But Henry strengthened his family's control of England, and he was also hoping to avoid conflicts. And his son became king in 1509. And who was his son? Henry VIII, and he was 18 years old. If you're going into English history, Henry VIII is going to be standing out as one of the kings you're going to want to remember. Henry VIII. Okay, about Henry. First of all, Henry was a devout Catholic when he took the throne. In fact, he even wrote a book attacking Martin Luther and the Reformation. And the Pope, which was Leo X, rewarded him as a defender of the faith of Romanism. So when you think of him, you always think, that he was against the Catholic Church. Well, not at first. You see, Henry had circumstances in his life that caused him to turn away from the Roman Catholic Church. And we'll find out about that in a minute. But the basic thing, he wanted a male heir. But his wife, Catherine of Aragon, and remember she was of Spain, as you know, had only given him a daughter named Mary. And Henry wanted a son. Henry was all about Henry. And whatever he felt, as he would be the leader of England, he would be actually the Pope of England, we'll find later on. Henry VIII and his wives. Well, he's known for his 6 wives, and we'll go over them a little bit just so you can see what kind of a man Henry was. So Catherine was his first wife, and like we said, she was much older, and she was actually the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. So Catherine united Henry and England with Spain. And Spain, as we know, was very Roman Catholic. As we know, Philip II and on to even Ferdinand and Isabella, they supported the Pope. But Catherine was older. He was kind of tired of her, of course, and he wanted a younger wife, and he wanted to divorce her so that he could actually marry Anne Boleyn, who was a servant of Catherine. And she was only 24, and she was not of royal blood at all, but he wanted to marry her. Well, Charles V was Catherine's nephew here, and he was the head of the Holy Roman Empire that in the Catholic, close to the Catholic and the Pope at that time, as we know, and he refused his request to get a divorce. So the Pope and the Roman Church became obstacles to Henry. Well, I don't like this Pope, and I don't like this Holy Roman Empire, and I am going to go ahead and join in the Reformation and protest. Was Henry born again? Very doubtful, let's just say that. Henry VIII was all about Henry VIII. So he broke with the Catholic Church and joined the Reformation, not because he wanted to read the Bible necessarily, although he would permit the Bible being read, and he would permit the Reformation just because he wanted to get a divorce from Catherine. Well, he did end up divorcing her, let's just say that. Well, the Reformation is said to begin in England with Henry VIII, but not really, because the Reformation first was started for political reasons with Henry VIII in England, but they already had a spiritual revival. Even though England was not politically involved at all, that people were reading the Bible and being born again and were realizing a lot of errors in the church. So we could go back to John Wycliffe and William Auckland, along with the Lollards, which were followers of John Wycliffe, and they had been fiercely persecuted in England because they had gone away from Catholicism or Romanism. And they were very influential, as there was a revival of people as reading the Bible and getting saved, and revival coming all the way through England. And many Englishmen were very disgusted with the popes, and they wanted Reformation. They wanted it to be reformed and away from them. The hearts of the English had been prepared by the witness of the Bible, as the Bible now was translated in England. And we know Roman Catholicism would not allow the English Bible. They did not want the common people to be reading the Bible at all, and they had outlawed the Bible. In fact, the Bible translators, which translated the Bible into English, Wycliffe in the 1300s and later Tyndale in the 1500s, were both severely persecuted. Tyndale was martyred for his faith in translating the Bible. And Wycliffe's bones were later dug up and burned because they hated him so badly. The Act of Supremacy of Henry VIII. In 1531, Henry forced English clergy to recognize him as the single protector and the only supreme Lord and head of the church. So here's the Pope Clement, and here's Henry. Henry's like, I don't want the Pope. What's he? I don't want him to be leader. I am going to be. So he said the Act of Supremacy made Henry supreme. So Henry VIII became the supreme power in England. In 1534, he passed the Act of Supremacy to recognize him as the supreme head. Head not only of politically, but also the head of the church. He wanted to be the head of the church. Now he could be like a Pope of England. So Henry closed those monasteries, and he allowed the printing of the English Bibles. But although Henry had other ambitions, the Bible was now accessible to all the Englishmen in the English translation. So that was the good thing. But Henry had his own ideas, as we'll find out. Henry had simply replaced the Pope in a sense. Now one man had absolute power politically and religious. So now he could say, I'm the head of the church and I am the head of England, the King of England. Henry ruthlessly suppressed rebels, destroyed goods and wives and children. He was still a ruthless king still, as he had no ambition really as a Christian ambition. He had simply become a political figure as a king. he basically agreed with the Roman Church on a lot of doctrines and practices. So when he put the Anglican Church together, he passed laws and for transubstantiation and other doctrines that were Catholic doctrines to be in the Anglican Church. And he also said that no one could preach unless he had his government license. So he said, I'll tell who could preach and who cannot preach around here. In fact, hundreds were hanged, disemboweled, and quartered if they went against Henry, whether they were Protestant or Catholic. Henry's wives. Okay, you can see everyone knows about Henry's wives. Henry raged on his wives. Let's just say that. He would get tired of a wife and want to do without her. He divorced Catherine of Aragon, and Catherine had their daughter Mary, which later would be considered Bloody Mary. And then he married Catherine's servant, Anne Boleyn, who had a daughter and named her Elizabeth. And this outraged the king so much that she had a daughter. He wanted a son. So he executed her on false charges of adultery and had Anne Boleyn killed. Her head beheaded, in fact. So that was his second wife. His third wife, Jane Seymour, who died giving birth to his son, Edward. So he had a son, and we'll find out about Edward. Edward was a very sickly son. So Jane died, so he's gone through 3, and Henry married 3 more times. The 4th one he divorced again. We'll find out why he divorced her in a bit. And the 5th one he executed, beheaded her, and his last wife outlived him. So you can imagine the drama with the 6 wives of Henry VIII. Wife to headless. This is a little thing I found in there. Basically, you see Catherine of Aragon. You know, she was the first married, older than he was, and in fact, he was betrothed to Henry basically betrothed to Henry's older brother first. So she ended up getting divorced. Catherine went back to Spain with her daughter Mary, which later would come back and be Bloody Mary. Okay. So Anne Boleyn was her servant. She was very pretty. She was handmaided. She refused to become a mistress, so he wanted to wed her. So that's when he sought the divorce. And then she had a baby, but her baby would be a girl. And so he was so upset that he had Anne beheaded. She was beheaded. Jane Seymour died after giving birth. So we have divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So we have Jane Seymour, and she died giving birth to Edward, he would become king, a very young king and a very sickly king indeed. And on from Jane Seymour, we have Anne of Cleves. The thing about Anne of Cleves, he saw her picture there, thought, oh, she's pretty good looking, you know, so he said, I will marry her. He looked and with the German, she was German, and he says, I'll pick her. She can come and be a queen. That will unite us with the Germans out there in the Holy Roman Empire. So she came. When she got there, her picture didn't match up to what she really looked like. And he thought she was very homely to him. So what did he have? He said, I'm going to divorce her. So as soon as she got there, he divorced Anne. I wouldn't say soon. She was king from January till July, not very long, or queen, I should say. And then Catherine Howard, and he thought she was so beautiful. Rose without a thorn, pretty woman, caught her eye, and he married. However, he thought that Henry was very paranoid. He thought that she was having an affair with one of his male courtiers, Thomas Culpeper, which come to find out she wasn't. It was a friend, basically their friendship. But Howard was charged with treason and adultery, and he was found guilty and executed, and she was beheaded. Second of his wives to be beheaded. And then came Catherine, And Catherine had 4 husbands, and Henry was her 3rd husband. And she had her friendship with Henry's daughter Mary caused her to catch the king's attention, and as she did, Catherine, it says, as Queen Catherine worked to restore Henry's court as a family home and helped strengthen the Tudor line. She actually lived after Henry died. Whew. After Henry VIII's death, what happened then? In 1547, Henry died but left the future freedom in doubt, because England's hard lesson, without religious freedom, there cannot be political freedom, and without political freedom, there cannot be religious freedom. So that's the lesson that England have to learn. Without religious freedom, there can't be political freedom. And without political freedom, there can't be religious freedom. England would have to hold on to its freedom. And Henry now had died. So who would become his heir? Edward's son, Henry's 6th son, Edward the 6th. Or Henry's 6th son, did I say 6th? Henry the 6th, the lost king of England, the struggle for the soul of England after the death of Henry VIII. That's a book on Edward. See how young he was. So he became king at the age of 9 years old. Can you believe that? In 1547. His regents, I should say, who ruled for him were Protestants. And these Protestants were named Thomas Cranmer, the Protestant Archbishop of Canterbury, and he had been restrained by Henry, and now he became ruling through Edward. And also Nicholas Ridley was a scholar, and Hugh Latimer. Remember at the beginning when we first studied, they would be both burned at the stake under Bloody Mary. But they were preachers, and they helped to reform. So along with Cranmer and Ridley and Hugh Latimer, they were gaining influence in the Reformation, as Edward was a Christian Protestant king. And he invited the reformers from Germany and Switzerland to teach at the English universities. And the Parliament repealed many of Henry's bogus religious laws. And the Book of Common Prayer, from 1549 to 1552, prayers were being sung. So Edward was this good influence as he was under advisors that definitely wanted to reform England. Bloody Mary. Well, Edward, being sick, died in 1553, just 6 years later. Young. Oh, we had 9 plus 6. We have 15. He was very young. I think he may have had hemophilia. They're not sure, but he died young. So now all that was left was Henry's daughters, right? Well, Mary Tudor was the first daughter of Henry and Catherine of Aragon, and she became queen, being that first daughter. She didn't even live in England. Her and Catherine went back to Spain. And so she, as being Catherine of Aragon was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, so she was the granddaughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. They were die-hard Roman Catholics. And Mary resolved to make England Roman Catholic. I'm going back there and I'm going to make them, they're going to all become Catholic no matter what. Of course, most of the people in England had now turned from the Catholic Church to their faith in God. But now she wanted to force them. People of England were forced to turn from their faith. For as soon as she got there, 300 persons refused to obey and turned back to Catholics, so they died in their convictions. She basically had them put to death. They were imprisoned, they were tortured, or death. 2/3 of the martyrs were Protestant clergy, including Cranmer, Ridley, and Latimer were burned at the stake. And Latimer said, as he was burned at the stake to Ridley, we shall this day light a candle in England, as I trust shall never be put out. Because the more martyrs, the more people were put to death, the stronger the faith, those of faith. As they looked at the martyrs, many came to know the Lord and to distrust the religion, the religious Roman Catholic Church. Here's a picture of Bloody Mary. Fox's Book of Martyrs was written, and Mary only strengthened the cause of her opponents. In 1563, John Fox, who was a historian at the time, wrote the classic document of the persecution that was going on. So you can read it. The Protestant beliefs were burned deeper and deeper into the English nation, as the more martyrs there were, the stronger the true church became, the stronger the reformers became too. So Mary Tudor then went and married who else but Philip II. Remember the monster of Spain? So she says, now I'm going to basically make England bow to not only the Pope, but to Spain and to Philip. So in 1554, Queen Mary married the future King of Spain, who was known for his devotion to the Pope. He hadn't become king yet because his father was still alive. It's really weird, but if you discuss this with anyone, you can look it up, that Philip, remember she was the granddaughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, but Philip was related. They were first cousins once removed, and they got married. They had no children. Together they planned to restore all to the Pope and plant a Romanist dynasty, a world dynasty. Philip brought the Inquisition into England. Remember, the Inquisition was that he would bring those spies in to see if anyone was not following the religious way he wanted them to, or be killed. Upon his arrival, he executed 300. That's when the execution became rampant. Fortunately, the English people refused to accept Philip as their king, and Mary, they did not want a Spanish. England did not want a Spanish king. And Mary remained childless. If she had a child, man, we probably would all end up being Catholic and Spanish. Not Catholic the way Catholics are. I don't want to say that, but Romanism. Philip returned to Spain to plot another scheme. Bloody Mary. She died in 1558 after 6 years of terror, and married to Philip. Terror for the English. The whole English land was in terror. And it accomplished the opposite of what she set out to do. The tragic interlude of her reign was over. It had sealed the conversion of the English people in the Reformed faith. Basically, the English people did not want to have anything to do with the Spanish Ferdinand or with Bloody Mary. She is the most hated of all of the English kings and queens. Okay, I'm going to stop there because we're getting long. I want to talk a little while about Lady Jane Grey, and then we'll go on to the Spanish Armada and on to Queen Bess.